Mark, tell us about yourself.
I'm an actor with a background in music, classical music, sacred music I did for 4 years in Germany, and then an MA in, again, music, then I did acting, and that's what I mainly do these days, acting and voiceover work.
Great. Why Richard II?
Because I was cast as Richard II 10 years ago, so this is my 10th anniversary of playing the character. I think I've been playing him now for about 4 different productions since then. And when I first got cast, I read the play and I was so hooked by the character that I just thought I have to play this character, and thankfully I was cast as well. And I chose to not touch Shakespeare's play before the rehearsals started. I had quite a bit of time actually in between getting cast and the start of the rehearsals. So I went and had a look at biographies, Nigel Saw's biography for example, and I had a look at images that still remain from the period. I even took myself on little pilgrimages to the shrine of St. Edward the Confessor, one of the saints that Richard highly revered. So I tried to sort of tackle the character from a historic point of view because I wanted to get behind the real king, the real man first before I had a look at Shakespeare's play. And then it was astonishing actually that Shakespeare had captured him quite well, I thought. Of course there are many historic mistakes in there. I'm sure he knew about that, but it works very well, and it's a lovely journey that he takes him through as well, up to the point of redemption, which we see in the speech, in the final speech.
So you approached Pontefract Castle to perform this last speech in. Had you been there before in your earlier research? I mean, when did Pontefract come to mind and your whole idea for this speech?
Great. Bronze Head Theatre took the play there in 2015. I played Richard then again, and it was for the first time in history that anybody's taken the play to the actual historic location. Shakespeare says, "Enter King Richard at Pontefract Castle." It's fantastic to actually be at that place. I don't know why, but I get a lot out of being in a historic location. It's the same reason why I live in York. I love the feeling of walking through Booth and Bar and thinking, for 2,000 years people have been walking through this gate and I'm one of them. I love that.
Wonderful.
So I've been approaching Pontefract Castle after the performance there, because we only performed it once. And we had a really good crowd there as well. So it was a bit sad that we only did one performance. So I thought it would be really nice to have something on camera that can travel to a wider audience, and who knows, maybe perform the play there again at some point.
And music is important. You mentioned music. There is music in this film. What is the music? Why did you choose it? And just talk a little bit about its impact.
Yes, the main piece basically is by John Dowland. John Dowland was a highly revered Elizabethan lutenist and songwriter. He travelled all over Europe. He must have been the sort of rock star of his time. And he wrote this wonderful piece called "In Darkness Let Me Dwell." And I just looked at the song text, at the lyrics, and it is the exact mirror basically of Shakespeare's speech. It ties in so nicely with what Richard's going through in the prison cell. So I thought it'd be such a waste not to use it, especially since he is a Shakespeare contemporary. So it suits quite well. It's quite funny because we're actually using, without me planning this, we're using 16th century music, or around the 1600s, to tell the story of a 14th century king for a 21st century audience. So it's sort of, we're bouncing in history, but the art form is around 1600 really.
Interesting. Wonderful. And how did you prepare for this, for the filming version of this speech? You know, this had clearly been in your mind, in your heart for a very long time, and as things came together in your imagination, creatively with music and location and costume and whatever else the effects had to be. But how did you, as the actor, prepare for this? How hard was it?
I think I went back mostly to my biographies. I love that. But I also compiled myself a music list because music seems to be the thing that puts me in certain moods as a tool, basically. I've sort of discovered that recently, that it helps me a lot. So I made a whole playlist of Richard II prison music, basically, and that works a treat for me. Other than that, I just did the usual. I went back to locations where Richard has been. He loved York, for example. He loved York Minster. These are usually my go-to points and places, really, to put myself back in the shoes of the actual man. And then, of course, I always do some exercises that I was kindly given by Yvonne, Yvonne Morley, our director. So I do a lot of technical exercises as well that are really useful to get me technically set up, so I don't have to think about all of this anymore when we're in the actual location. Yeah.
And how was it? How was the days filming there, for real, in a prison cell?
Incredible. I don't think I can find the right words for it, really. I think the film hopefully speaks for itself. But I found there was people always ask me, what funny things happened on set? And I can't think of a single thing that was particularly funny, except for me standing on a hot water bottle in between the takes. But I felt it was a very solemn, moving, reverent atmosphere down in the prison cell. And I'm very grateful to Yvonne, our director, to have not pushed the technical aspects too much, or not at all actually, but she's a real actor's friend in just carefully nudging out the emotions. Because sometimes directors just won't go there from A to B, that's right, okay, and cut, thank you. That's not what happened. It was I think the atmosphere you see on the film is what we had in the dungeon, in front of the camera, around the camera, behind the camera.
Lovely. And you've played him on stage, you've done the live performance, and now on screen. Do you have a preference? How different was it?
That's an interesting one, because I don't know the answer to that. But I love the theatre. Of course I would. Because you get the privilege of playing a character from A to Z. It is a real privilege to go through the whole journey and taking the character with you, basically. Whereas on camera in a film, obviously you get little bits and pieces, which are not chronologically correct usually, thrown at you, and there's a lot of waiting, and then you have to be your finest in front of the camera. But having said that, I think for me the process is the same. I have to prepare exactly the same for a theatre performance as I have for a piece in front of a camera. The inner truth of the character still needs to be intact. And I'm always saying that I've got a little volume button which I can crank up when I've got a theatrical performance. For example, the mystery plays, where sometimes you're standing on a wagon and you've got, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people that you have to reach somehow. So my volume, both in terms of vocalizing speeches as well as my physicality, has to be cranked right up so I can reach every single person. Even my eyes have to work extra hard to reach an audience. If it's film, I think the truth remains the same, obviously, and it's cranking or taking the volume right down. If it's an extreme close-up, it has to be just at sort of 1 or 2 or something like that. A wonderful film director once said to me, "We have to see through your eyes into your heart on camera." And I love that. That's exactly what happens. And if the theatre audience could do that, that'd be even better, but we have to use our tools, our bodies, our voices to make that happen on stage.
And finally, it's called The Sacred King. And what do you hope the viewers, the audience as it were, will get from this?
I hope why I like Richard II so much is because I feel for him. I feel pity for him. What a poor guy. Having been put in this position from a very young age, at the age of 10, be crowned a king at the wrong time. But so many historians say about him, he was there at the wrong time, wrong place, wrong job. And I think that's absolutely true, unfortunately. Because Louis XIV got away with being the Sun King, and it didn't do him any harm. But nobody wanted to know that from Richard. It's a very interesting character, I think. But I think Shakespeare does that a lot. He chooses historic characters that have done some wrong, and Richard was just the wrong man in the wrong job at the wrong time, like I said, and made a number of mistakes, of course. As did Macbeth, as did Henry VI. There are so many, as did Hamlet. And Shakespeare's got a knack for using his plays as pieces of wisdom, and he turns the character around. So he makes them go through all this horrible stuff that they quite often put upon themselves. But at the end of their lives, quite often, and it doesn't matter whether they die or not, he turns it all around, and that's usually what a character's final speech usually is all about. He makes them realize what wrong they've done and why they've done it, and he turns them around, and that in itself is quite a sacred moment. And a friend of mine said that whenever Shakespeare has his character experience some sort of enlightenment, music plays, and that's wonderful, I think. So if the audience can have pity with him in the end, really, and feel for him, and realize that he's turned his life around, and actually I get something out of this as well, then hopefully that's what I wanted to achieve anyway, or what it does to me, for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.